wanted to say, first off, it's my first ever event, and so of course I'm nervous and blah blah, all of that stuff. But what I wanted to say is, it's really true that I spent every day upstairs on the 8th floor, and the Centre for Fiction is a great place to become a member. They really, you know, you get your space, you get your locker, you feel like, although everyone else outside in the real world treats you like, you know, boy, go and get a real job. When you come here, they kind of really make you feel like you're, you know, you're part of, you know, that great tradition of Rise, even when, you know, you're not. You know, you've got this idea that you are in your head, but you know, it's only when you get in here that you think, well, maybe I'm going to make it, and that I think is really important, and I'm very grateful to you for that.
Thank you so much.
It's all right.
Now I feel like I'm blushing, because that's really nice to hear, because I think all of us, you know, are toiling away up on the 3rd floor. This is really nice to hear. So on that note, first question. So while you were up there on the 8th floor, could you tell us a little bit about what your inspiration was in writing the book, and if you had like a catalyst for?
Well, first off, I left London pretty much in a rage. I was really angry at a lot of things. I ran a magazine for 5 years, but it wasn't like I think the first 2 years was great fun. You know, I felt like I was, you know, meeting all the people that I had dreamed about meeting and doing interviews, and we had this great team and lots of creative people who were doing stuff together. But then I stopped writing, and that's what I wanted to start it for. I wanted to have this space where lots of young people who got rejected at the Nationals could come and write. And I ended up just running around London trying to sell ads to keep this thing afloat, and it felt like I wasn't getting the ads that I felt like I should be getting, and I, being a lot younger, got really angry. I was like, you know, the only reason you're not giving me the same ads that you put in other magazines is because it's for black men. And I got really tired of having the same things, you know. Excuse the babies, but my baby's here too, so these are all like cousins and so forgive us. But what I was going to say is, so when the magazine died, I felt really down. I felt full of, I felt a bit like a failure. Not a bit like a failure, I felt completely like a failure. I wasn't really sure what to do, and that time, it was 2006, and during that time, in the summer in London, I don't know if you know this, but there were about 30 murders, 30 young men, predominantly black, from my area that died. They were killed, and a lot of the newspapers were saying it's because of drugs, it's because of, you know, London is turning into America and blah, blah, blah. But I felt like that wasn't the case, and I tried to write. I thought I was a journalist for a minute, and I was sending my version of what I thought was going on. I was sending that around to the newspapers, and they didn't want to publish it. They were happy with the sensationalist kind of take. And that just fueled my anger. And then I went out with a friend and he told me about his younger brother who had died recently. He had killed himself. He jumped off a tower block, and it was a tower block that we used to mess around on when we were kids. And I knew his younger brother, and I just felt, I started thinking about why or what would make somebody do that. And I went home and I started to write, and I realized that I knew what he was feeling. I knew what would make a young black person from East London give up hope. I was feeling the same, and the reason why I was getting so annoyed with the newspapers was because they were saying it was always down to drugs, and I had gone to school, thank you very much, and I was still in the same position. I still felt like I understood why people would turn their back on mainstream, people would do things that they weren't so proud of. And it was the first, I think it was the first 40 pages that came out, and they made it into the book. So yeah, that was the catalyst. I'm sorry for rambling, but
speaking of that sort of, that catalyst of the book, there's a lot of, that scene which comes so near the beginning is incredibly brutal, and I was wondering if you felt like you needed to sort of live up to that brutality in some way, or to carry out that expectation of that violence.
See, yeah, a lot of the reviews I got spoke about the violence, and a lot of people were saying, and it was a big issue for me when I was thinking about writing it, because I'm one of those people who picks up novels by black men, and I go, I know what this is about. If it says gang, then I'm like, oh, I can't take another one of these types of books. And we do that to ourselves.
Yes.
And we feel like we know already, and we've heard it a thousand times. But I really tried to not make it be like that run of, I didn't do anything because I felt I had to live up to anything. I read somewhere just this weekend, and I forget who said it, but I read Paris Review a lot, and there's their art of fiction. They always ask these famous writers, big writers, proper writers, how they work, and I've been reading that for a while, and I always find that you get a lot of chaff, but you also get a lot of truth in that. And somebody said in that recently that the best asset that a writer has is the truth. And I think that's really important. So I didn't feel like I had to force anything. Because the violence that comes in the story is pretty much what I think is a reflection, a true reflection of a time. I don't feel that way so much now about That's not mine. Yeah, sorry, I can't remember where we were. The truth. Right. I think the thing is to stick with being honest, and that's what I did. I didn't feel like, and there is violence in it, and there are drugs, but I think it was last weekend or 2 weekends ago, Wale Soyinka, he got into trouble for saying he's the first African Nobel Prize winner, and he got into trouble recently for saying that the UK was a cesspit for Islamists, sorry. And so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that, and everyone came down on him obviously because a Nigerian has recently tried to blow up a plane in London, and Nigeria has recently been added as the one of the 10 places in the world that is breeding terrorists. But Soyinka said, well, what Soyinka said is true, and he was talking about, and lots of people are speaking right now about Islam and Muslims and the danger that we have from people who are joining sects and getting angry. But my issue with that is that certainly in London, that's where I was born, that's where I was raised, there are lots of people who are angry and they don't read the Quran. There are lots of young black men, and I remember being like, when I lost my business, lots of people, black and white, they who are directors of companies, they lose their livelihoods. But when I lost mine, I felt like I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to. I read law, and I didn't want to be a lawyer because every person that had been to school with that tried to get articles, couldn't get a job. These are perfectly qualified, well-qualified people who, I ended up hearing were locked up because they've committed a crime, and so it started to make me feel like almost everyone I knew was failing, and I didn't want to. I wanted to, you know, I felt like I'm not thick. I don't want to get involved in crime, but I could. You understand what I mean? I could. I can, and I know people that do, and I don't feel like everybody wants to. And of course, there are people that do want to, but there are also a lot of people who I feel strongly that are forced into these things. I mean, you know, everybody wants to eat, and if you know there's a system in place that prevents you from doing that, and I'm talking about white racism, and it's very difficult to say that in London because everyone's like, oh God, he's angry. And I was for a long time, but I'm not now, and I'm not like, and I don't, and I'm not a racist, and I'm not like a firebrand who, you know, I'm not that, but I do feel like, and I read this recently because I wasn't sure about what to read out, and there's a lot of it that I think that's a lot. It is a bit much, but at the time, you know, I was angry and I was upset and I didn't know what to do, and it's kind of, I feel like it's true, and it's not, you know, I read some of the reviews and I think, wow, it's doing well, and I didn't, you know, I'm writing something now and it's very different. And all the ideas that people talk about in terms of structure and plot, the book I'm working on now, I am much more involved in that as a writer should be. Whereas this, I feel like it just kind of came out.
Well, in some way what you're speaking to seems a lot like James's point of view, that he could very much have ended up tumbling into this world of crime.
Right, exactly. And then on that note, like, well, part of what I thought I would do is try and pick up, for the reading, was try and pick up parts that I felt like I still kind of agreed with. I understood why, I can relate to the work still, and that's really important for me. I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to have something which had my name on it that I didn't agree with, and I can see that can happen really easily, especially with you know, with first-time authors. We don't know anything really. We're just trying our best to get published, and we pretty much do whatever, you know, our editors say.